speaking of the Neymar Juniors, let's get right to it. In preliminary talks, as I mentioned, with 3 MLS teams, one of those teams is Chicago Fire. Neymar's current team is Al Hilal, where he arrived in 2023. And although he has significant past with Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez, sources confirmed to ESPN that it would be, quote, impossible due to restrictions MLS has in place. All of that information and more you can find on ESPN.com, written by our very own Jeff Carlisle, who is with us right now. Jeff, what's the latest with this connection that you're hearing?
Well, the latest is that, Chicago has the inside track in terms of MLS teams. Chicago has the discovery rights. Now, granted, that is not the be-all, end-all. We've seen other teams in the past kind of worm their way into a deal. Marco Reus was one. Charlotte had his discovery rights last year, and he ended up going to Los Angeles. So, again, it's not cast in stone, but I would say at this point, among MLS teams, the Chicago Fire have the inside track. Now, this is not going to go unnoticed around the world. I mean, other teams are going to see that Neymar is available, and I'm sure that teams in Brazil and teams in Europe are going to be inquiring about his services, because obviously he's still, as injury hit as he's been over the last 2 years, he's still one of the biggest names in the sport. So, I think it's a situation where, Chicago has put their marker down. They're going to keep working on this deal. I still put the odds at slightly less than 50-50. Obviously the talks have gotten this far along, and Neymar hasn't, laughed them out of the room. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes forward. I mean, Greg Berhalter is the coach and sporting director now, and the owner, Joe Mansueto, in the past has not been averse to spending money. So, we'll just have to wait and see how this progresses. But still, big news for MLS if they could get Neymar across the line.
Jeff, how similar does this seem to you when it comes to contracts like what we recently saw with Lionel Messi, MLS, all these teams trying to make that happen? Obviously,
Neymar is going to command a huge salary. From what I understand, MLS is structuring the deal, I would say in similar terms to the way they did for Lionel Messi. There will be a salary, there will be sponsorship opportunities, there will be outside revenue streams that Neymar will be able to tap into. I don't think it'll be to the same extent that he did in Saudi Arabia. I mean, that's some crazy money that they're throwing around in that country, for soccer players. But I would not be surprised to see it's structured differently. Whether there's a cut of the Apple deal, or I think that remains to be seen. I would say that's unlikely, but I could certainly see sponsors, apparel makers, trying to chip in and augment Neymar's salary so that it is worth his while to come to Major League Soccer.
Kasey, what do you make of this possibility?
Well, I think there's obviously a lot of owners right now that are trying to kind of do something to kind of help propel, what's happened over the last couple of years with the Apple deal and the reduction of eyes on Major League Soccer matches. And so if they kind of get an owner to commit a bunch of money to hope to get more people to buy subscriptions to watch more games, then that's what they're going to try to do. But I think there was one thing on the screen right now that should worry everybody. 1 goal in 7 games. I mean, how much do you want to pay for a guy that's potentially injured the whole time? So I think it all depends on what the numbers are, what the structure of the contract is, and also, does Neymar want to go to Chicago? I mean, when Jeff was talking about this discovery thing, yeah, that goes away because a player says, yeah, I'll come to Major League Soccer, but I'm not going to Charlotte, and I'm not going to Columbus, and I'm not going wherever. If you can get me to Miami or LA, yeah, sure, I'll come to Major League Soccer, but I'm not going there. So can you figure that out?
The guy was in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure Chicago's going to feel like Paris for him. So I'm not worried about that one there. Listen, Case is right. What kind of Neymar are we going to get here? It's 7 games that he's played since he tore his ACL. He's going to be 33 in February. It's maybe not the same Neymar that led Brazil. He's Brazil's all-time leading goal scorer, led them to the Olympic gold. He's one of the best players in the world during the Cristiano and Messi era. That's exactly who he is. But what kind of Neymar will we see? And for how much? Kasey's 100% right. And for how much? But I'm going to tell you what, Case. I don't care. I don't care. If Neymar decides to go to Chicago, okay? Now, I don't care, given this caveat, the contract. Messi like money. Messi's like, what, 20 million a year? Give him his 20 million a year. Messi has merchandising. Give him his merchandising. Messi's got gates, whatever the case may be. Give him that. I will take a half-hearted, limping Neymar to inject some sort of relevance to the Chicago Fire that's not had relevance since the Cuauhtemoc Blanco, like years. It's been that long since Chicago was a relevant team in Major League Soccer. I applaud that they went out and got Greg Berhalter. I applaud that they're going out and getting players. I applaud that they're even in the discussion for getting Neymar. You go out and you get him. Where you don't sign that contract is if it's Messi-like in what Jeff was saying. Apple shares and then shares of a team like the Chicago Fire, and you're giving away your future. Spend what you need to spend. If it's a $20 million, come on. You gave, I think, more than that in the years that Shaqiri was there to him. This is Neymar. Inject some life. Bring something to that fan base that's been so just with you the whole time that you've been terrible. You've been irrelevant. Inject life into that city when it comes to the sport, but do it smartly. And I think smartly here is not giving away the keys to the kingdom, but knowing that you have to pay for Neymar.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this could be a quid pro quo situation. Relevancy for Chicago Fire, a team for Neymar, although, Jeff, you did mention those options that he's looking at in Brazil as well. So how realistic is this possibility from what you're hearing?
Listen, I mean, the Chicago Fire are in the room, so I think that right there is a positive. You know, like I said before, I think it's, 40% chance that the Fire could pull this off. But listen, I thought that about Inter Miami and Lionel Messi plenty of times. I think, during that saga, it was like, no, he's going to go back to Barcelona. No, he's going to go to, the Middle East. He had all these different options, but eventually, Inter Miami proved and very persuasive, and they were able to convince him to sign. So, I think it's still early days, but and it's going to be a huge challenge because I think the pull of Brazil is going to be powerful, but there's also advantages to living in the United States, and so again, we'll see what Neymar decides, but. Again, I would put the odds, less than 50-50, but not too much.
Let me just play devil's advocate for a second with Jeff Carlisle. I know Jeff's not going to reveal his sources, but in your very well-written article, you mentioned Chicago Fire, one of the teams. Inter Miami is not. There are two other MLS teams. I don't know about you, Kasey, but one place that just seems like it's dying for a Neymar is a market that I think could support a Neymar, because massive Brazilian population, which is Orlando. And who happens to be Inter Miami's rival? That's right, Orlando City. I can think of no better place for a player like Neymar to go than in the sunshine of Florida with Orlando and bring a new layer to what is Messi Major League Soccer. And I think if there's going to be any time to inject life into Major League Soccer right now, it's why you have Messi. You got to give Messi his Cristiano. And if, as much as they are friends, you can give Neymar to Messi to be his Cristiano, to be his rival in neighboring cities, in the state of Florida, I think that's a win-win for everybody here. And
speaking of marketing possibilities, when you just mentioned Orlando and the population, Kasey, March is with Orlando Pride, so that's another little stint that you can do there. It seems like a win-win in that situation, too.
Well, also remember how Orlando kicked off, their inauguration season with this little Brazilian player named Kaká. So, to be able to kind of build off of that and kind of, you're talking about building life back into the Chicago Fire, but Orlando hasn't been the same team since those Kaká years as well. And if you can bring Neymar back in there, back into a community that, as you mentioned, is Brazilian rich, and be able to go in there and relive some of that glory. I love the rivalry situation. Get those two friends kind of building that up as well. So, yeah, that makes more sense. I think when you mentioned earlier that he was in Saudi and that it wouldn't be a problem going to Chicago, yeah, it probably wouldn't be a problem going to Chicago if they want to pay what Saudi's paying, but we know that's not going to be a possibility. So you have to build other things into the equation. Why did Messi take kind of a pay cut compared to what he could have made in the Middle East? Because his family said, hey, we've got a lot of money. We can still make a lot of money. Miami Beach sounds pretty darn good. Let's go for that. Chicago, for me, is one of the greatest cities in America, but it's a little bit different for a South American going, into a Chicago preseason in January than it would be being in LA, Miami, Orlando, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? But with the right winter gear, I mean, he can put up with the cold at the end of the day, but that's still a 40% possibility, as Jeff said.